Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or our SoundCloud page at soundcloud.com/thedirectorscut. Today's episode is the second in our 3-episode run covering our hugely popular Meet the Nominees feature film symposium. Now in its 25th year, the event is a roundtable discussion with the directors nominated for the Guild's Award for Outstanding Directorial Achievement in Feature Film. Alejandro Iñárritu, the director of The Revenant, Tom McCarthy, the director of Spotlight, Adam McKay, the director of The Big Short, George Miller, the director of Mad Max Fury Road, and Ridley Scott, the director of The Martian, all gathered at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles to discuss the making of their films with moderator Jeremy Kagan. So please enjoy part 2 of our Meet the Nominees episodes and hear about how our nominees solved unexpected problems on the sets of their films and were willing to explore whatever happy accidents occurred during filming. Enjoy.
All right, let's talk about this idea of happy accidents. Ridley, I'm looking at a movie like this where you're literally creating a world that does not exist. Are there any room for happy accidents, or in fact, is that also part of the process?
It's experience. I have no happy accidents. I'm usually so well planned. It's dead easy. Sorry, that's the truth. Martian have done 72 days, and I am so prepped because I've made it in my head before I get there.
Right.
That's why I also adopt a minimum of 4 to 11 cameras because I know how to use them. They'll never be wasted. And so in most of the time, there were 4 cameras, even with Matt by himself in whatever he was in, because, you know, if there's a flub, a happy flub, and if I'm doing a two-hander, and I want, in that two-hander, get an accident in dialogue, and most of you'll say cut, I just let it run, and because if you've got 2 smart actors, they're going to use the process, because the flub can be frequently something is really better than you had planned. If you're captured, you're already run, just let it run. So that's why I was working 2 cameras, 2 and 2, and all that bullshit about, you know, eyeline, all that crap's absolute nonsense. And actually, to light it is absolute nonsense. You can light everything with 4 cameras. And so I always have...
Say that louder. There's some cameramen in the back.
Yeah. I'll repeat it. It's bullshit. Okay. So I'm not going to lecture you about how you avoid eyelines and all that stuff, because it's absolute nonsense. And actually, when you get into the real editing process, you barely notice. And the danger about what we do for a living, we can study our navel too long, too often. And that's, I think, speed is very interesting, because I used to think that actors like to have, when I very first began live television, I had very few years of live television, 4 years at BBC, 2 of that at Rediffusion, where I was learning to use 6 cameras and live drama. So you're doing outside broadcast fundamentally with live drama. And the first show I did was like for the thing called Z-Cars, movie Softly Softly. The audience would have 13 million people at night. You have a day rehearsal, you hit it that night, you're live, you're on the air. And that's why I learned to use 6 cameras, I think, because you'd see them all moving. And woe betide you if you look at the 6 cameras while you're trying to concentrate on transmission. You just got to watch transmission. Everything else is this morass of movement, changing gear, changing lenses, focusing. If you ever looked at that, you have a panic attack. So I just learned to drive the bus this way. It's like driving a 747. And so I learned to literally think geometrically. So, and every scene has a geometry. So when I'm reading or even prepping, I'm actually reading the geometry in the scene, right down to close-up, here, wide, medium thing. I just got that's part of my DNA. So when I go on, I know I'm going to be a minimum of 4 cameras. I'll get them in somehow without getting in the way of the actors. It means I'll get it quick. If there's an accident, which I like, I'll have captured it. And then you move on. Way back when, I used to assume an actor would want as many takes as he possibly could. And I learned later that they don't want that. Like in a casting session, you come in, and I learned this at BBC, and at BBC, I was a young director. I grew a beard because I looked like 12 years old, and no one was actually taking me seriously. And I brought this very good actress in, but whether the guy was the window cleaner or a very good actress, I felt I owed the respect of telling him the entire story. And so my casting sessions went on endlessly, and I remember being very embarrassed and intimidated by having this very beautiful actress in. Well, I'm going to tell her she's been doing 2 scenes, and I said, and then I looked up and she's doing this, she's going. And ever since then, I now keep it simple and keep it short. And so it's,
there's a wonderful moment when he's leaving finally to, I guess, go to the MAV and the last thing, and he actually forgets his helmet, and it played so well, at least for me, that I actually thought, I wonder if
you love not in the script. You just love those things.
That's one of the examples that I'm saying. How did that one evolve? Because if you
I just say, I watch him and say, you know what? If you've ever driven down you're in a foreign country. You normally drive on. What do we drive on the right here? You drive on the right. Where are we driving on the right here? Right?
They drive on the left.
Yeah.
That's to the two of you.
No,
I'm not sure what Mexico does.
And you stop, and you have a picnic or something.
Right.
You pull out, and you're on the wrong side of the road. So you think, the f*** is this guy flashing his lights at me? You're actually on the wrong side of the road. So I always, remember that process.
So
happy accident. This is one big happy accident. There's so many scenes in the Martian with Matt by himself where he has to emote anger. Humor with him is very easy, but the emotional stuff where it's got to be real, that's the trickiest stuff. And you can only just weep just so many times, and you can only astronauts don't cry. Okay, right. And big men don't cry. Sorry, they don't. And so you can only have that happen once. It's more than once you think, wait a minute, he's a bit of a wimp. Okay, so we've talked it through. And with Matt, he's wonderful, both technician, intuitive, writer, everything. So you can literally sit down and block the geometry, the emotional geometry of the scene. While I'm here, do it in day and a half, a day. How much here? Not much. Oh, how much there? That one. Okay. So you have it blocked. So we've agreed the geometry of emotion. So I'm getting to this point now. And we tried one in the vehicle. And afterwards he said, didn't like that. No, I didn't. That was not right. So I know where it has to be. The logical place has to be. And if you talk about it, the chances are they won't pull it off. Mm-hmm. You don't want to talk about it too much. So I got the sound man on one side to cobble together NASA talking to the crew, talking to the Jessica Chastain, who was the captain, talking to the talkback between all of them and NASA, who are now communicating. And they are going to, the moment is now literally, if it goes wrong, he will die. He will simply not get on that ship and he'll pass on into space forever. So it's takeoff point, where he's got to now take off. Problem is, he's no longer in the hands of himself. He's allowed himself to be disconnected to Michael Pena, who is the pilot up there, who is now guiding and pressing the button for takeoff. And then they will catch him, right? And I figured, come on, this is it. And I didn't tell him. I had this great, funny old sound mix of lots, many voices all talking at once. It sounds like good NASA stuff and good pilot stuff, good right stuff, right? And Jessica was a great pilot, cool pilot, bloody hell. And she then said to him, how do you feel down there? And he suddenly, I saw tears, and holy shit, he started to blub on camera. And I could see him fighting it like crazy. And it was terrific. It was marvelous. And I said, let it run. I went downstairs to him, and he said, I'm really sorry I lost it there. I said, when I heard those voices, I just filled up. Shall we do it again? I said, we got it. And we'll do it again. So we do it again. And he looked at it and he said, no, you're absolutely right. That's the right moment there. And right that you want cameras, 4 cameras on top, profile, every which way you got it.
So the accident was not an accident, really. You prepped it.
No, it was not. No, I'd always put it in. Always put it in. Other accidents are if I blow blood with pipes on a set, or I'm going to bring this nasty little son of a bitch out of somebody's chest, it's going to be wiped out the set. It'll take a week to wipe it down, because raspberry blood tends not to wipe off easily. And so that's why I applied 5 cameras. So that was one shot.
Got it.
So 5 cameras on them. I had a hose on Veronica Cartwright to shut her up because we weren't going to hit her with blood. She went over the back of the sofa. But to have that one take, and if I didn't get it in one, I'd have to clean up and come back 5 days later.
Got it.
That was it.
So then you were blessed in that sense. That's having the blessing of it.
Yeah, but happy accidents is kind of guiding. You've got your intuition tell you this could happen.
Yep.
If it does happen, I want to get it.
Is it true you didn't tell the actors what was going to happen?
I wouldn't show it to them.
Okay.
So, because I knew they'd laugh. To see that, the pistol grip in the guy's hand, they just roar with laughter and I'm finished. So the guy, I put him under the table, lying in John Hurt's lap, because John Hurt's lying on the table like that, bent down. And I'm lying on the table, giving him white wine to keep him calm. He's like that. I've now screwed a plastic chest on him, and they are already action. And then boom, and the T-shirt didn't go. So sort of cut, get out the set, and I had to lie on the table and razor blade the T-shirt. Again, come back. Because they started bursting out laughing because the thing wouldn't come out.
Got it. There's a happy accident.
When it did come out, that was good.
George, happy accidents, particularly on this film, which is an incredibly designed film.
Well...
And you don't want any accidents.
I'm sitting... Yeah, exactly. You don't want unhappy accidents, but in this case, it was very carefully designed. I mean, it looks like a chaotic film, but we had to really, really prepare. In terms of performance, there's subtle little things. I mean, what's really interesting about this movie, it was very noisy on set. A lot of it was on the move. So there's very little opportunity to go in there and do notes. Often I was remote. We did have some sort of speaker in there. It was just, they could barely hear me say action or cut. But the one thing we did do was, if we were on a run, and we might have several miles to travel, we would do, providing we could go back to the first position, as it were. I mean, the actors could regroup. There was no event that stopped us doing another take. We'd just say, let's go again, and then we'd look at it. And by then, I mean, this was an atypical movie, because no sooner are you saying action than you're yelling cut, because it's made up of little pieces. But I'm trying to think of moments. There are moments of performance and so on, but they're very, very subtle. You know, there are other movies that come to mind where you're always looking for that.
Because of the nature of this movie, then, in order to be able to actually make it, I heard you had literally thousands of storyboards in order to be able to put this into...
Well, there were 3,500 storyboards, but that's panels.
Right.
But that was the first iteration of the movie. The whole exercise with this movie was to make basically a silent movie with sound.
Right.
And the best way to render that was to do it as storyboards. So...
did you end up pre-vising those storyboards as well?
No. We can't pre-vis real-world stuff as well. But we did pre-vis a storm sequence, simply to see how that would go. But for the rest of it, we didn't. The storyboards were a document on which to build the production. That was the main thing. And it's way, way easier to describe the spatial relationships of the characters and the vehicles and so on and so on. So that was a really, really useful tool.
And how did you work with your storyboard artists? did you give them something? I don't know if you sketched something or do something beforehand, or did you say, this is the nature of this scene, solve these problems? How did you work with them?
Well, I worked with I wrote the initial version with Brendan McCarthy, who's a wonderful, I don't know if you know him, but a wonderful Irish graphic novelist. Very, very, very fine artist. And then we kind of almost dictated it and wrote it out knowing where we were to go. And then we sat in this room with whiteboards and we draw on the whiteboards. I used to do a lot of drawing and painting, but I was nowhere near his caliber. And I also worked with two other storyboard artists I've worked with, Peter Pound and Mark Sexton. And we basically sat and went shot for shot, scene for scene, exploring it. And what was really interesting too is that a lot of the designs were being done. So I'd work with one storyboard artist. I'd often get up and do a very, very rough scribble, and we'd talk about it, and I'd do a series of panels, but my version, they'd look at it, we'd talk about it, we'd say, okay, let's do that, and one of them would take it off and render them at a much better level.
The Attack of the Buzzards, those ones with the porcupine things, if you were looking at that storyboard and the evolution of it, because it's a very complex sequence, and they're very complex, creatures, if you will, that you've got, that you devised. The creative process of the first version of that storyboard, and then really specifically say, well, we want to flip this here, flip that there. If we were in that dialogue, what would be happening over a certain amount of time?
Well, mainly as we were interrogating the movie and looking at budget and so on, there might be trims here and there, we might adjust them. But what then happened is you then try to get out into the real world. And with the crew, they would go out and test some of these things. Everything was rehearsed. You have to do that with a stunt movie like this. Every vehicle roll was rehearsed with an alternate vehicle, a cheap version of it, because there has to be the precision to get in your cameras. And I've never used so many cameras as in this movie, so now you're putting the storyboards aside and testing it against the real world, and that becomes, that takes primacy.
And these tests were with cameras, so I assume. So would you, when you were testing, let's say a roll, would you have 3 or 4 cameras on the test in order to see?
Yeah. They might be just cheap GoPros sometimes, right. But everything was tested that way. Yeah.
Oh, got it. Thank you. Wow. Alejandro, any accidents, happy accidents in the making of this? And I know there must have been because of the way you make these things.
The film itself is an accident. It just happened by an accident. We were just walking in the woods and suddenly a bear came and shoot it! It was a happy one. We came alive. No, I have to say that there's like a very contradictory thing that I learned from this film because it's a unique film and I learned a lot from it, and learning by preparing a lot. I think as Ridley and George did, I think these kind of films when you are in these huge landscapes, which I have never done in my life, by the way. I have never had I hate green, I hate trees, and in none of my films you will see one tree. I hate them. Always I caught them, and now I was surrounded by trees. I was shocked. I was like, how I shoot a tree, and it's so difficult to shoot trees and horses, and so it was for me a learning process. This film has to be extremely well prepared, like nothing I have done, because it requires, conceptually, I wanted to make it the way it's done, which is basically with long shots that I, in a way, learned from Birdman. But in Birdman, I was completely in control situation in corridors and theaters, and it was very, very much about dialogue base and things like that. Here, it was a completely different animal that, thanks to the great preparation and time that we have with Scott Robertson and James Kochtopol, that we really share a lot of time with Chivo Lubeski and trying to find the best way. So I started scouting location this film 5 years ago. So every locations I knew that it will be have to be decided to serve a purpose, which will be, I knew that we will have to shoot in natural light, and every location not has to be used right, but with the right light direction, and it will be used for 1 hour and a half. And I, differently from George and Ridley, I decided to shoot just with one camera and one take and long take. So that for me was very extremely kind of terrifying, because there are scenes that are action scenes that involve hundreds of people, and you want to capture what is important, and I wanted to have these epic, sometimes moments, that to see the landscape and the amount of what is in that, like the paintings of these things. But then, if that is not related to an emotional point of view, then what is that about? So to choreograph all that, even when I was casting, I said to every actor how I'm going to be shooting this film, and they will have to be subordinate to a very precise and meticulous way. So it will not be the classic, what about if we try that? Or what about, no, because everything will have to be like clockwise, because we were shooting, I think I asked you, like 14 millimeters, sometimes 12 millimeters, that you are seeing 180 degrees. So there's nobody to hide. Everybody has to be around the camera. So in a way, everybody has to know in advance what to do. And because the film will start being shot in the fall, and we know that we will be shooting in winter and then deep winter, we have to prepare those landscapes 4 months before we start shooting, because the snow will come, so for the trucks to come in, to the horses to get in. So the logistics of this film and the way that the months of preparation was something that I have never experienced in my life. That was so difficult and so expensive in that sense. And honestly, without that preparation, we could have never shot the film the way we did, because when we arrived to these landscapes 4 months later, they were completely devastated, or they was completely different, or a flood has come, and all what we planned was, but we have the basics. So what I'm saying is that I didn't do storyboards, but I kind of did like a real-time previs with the camera and with the actors and the stunts first. So basically not storyboards, but with the camera, really there was a preconceived things when I did the scouting location, and then with a video camera to be just finding what is the point of view and structuring what every frame has to be told, and when to shift, and from this point we start with Leo and then we shift to Tom.
You're doing this. You don't have Leo and Tom at this moment. You have stunt people and stand-ins for this particular.
Yes. First is just with the stunts, and Doug Coleman, who was great in this, helped me to start to getting from here. I did a storyboard 5 years ago. I'm a terrible painter, but I use with my little things. I did something that I knew what was the anchor points of view of that battle that I want to shoot. So then with these stunts and sometimes I will say extras, just to be understanding, we did the whole thing one by one with measured steps. Okay, now we pan here. Okay, now mark that. Okay, now from here discover that. Boom, that will be there. Then we go to the elk dog. Then the point of view shift to Tom. Then this ghost time point of view. Then Captain Henry goes in. So we rehearse for days and sometimes weeks. And then you go to the next level. Okay, now let's see the action. Okay, now that. And then until the actors arrive. And then when the actors arrive, it was a pre-designed, very well planned for them to now get it into that. And that's tough for actors, I have to say, because then they are kind of, wrapped in a very, very pre-concept kind of thing.
Did you show them, by the way, these videos?
Not necessarily. I was just getting them. But I think that I felt that they knew. I think a good relation with actors is built on mutual trust. And they trust that I have been invested myself a lot. So in a way, once I think they feel that you have really done all that work, in a way, there can be a rebellion and said, what the fuck, I'm not like a slave, or I will not do that, because, or suddenly they get excited by it. And in this case, I was lucky that all these guys, suddenly we were playing like cowboys and Indian, and it was kind of, okay, now 2, 3, 4, okay, camera, boom, and it was incredibly precise. Every frame was a study, every movement from the background, everything was, it was So what I found that was, in terms of happy accidents, is that we prepare, and I'm talking about the big scene, but the same way it was prepared every single scene, every single one, And honestly, it's the first time, because all the films that I have done in a way are they have the genes of theater or literature based on that kind of thing. But here, taking out those elements from theater or literature where most of the film is silent to, is when suddenly cinema has another possibilities that I discovered that I was so fascinated, because it's when pure cinema, start going, and with very few things, just by picture, you have to show the story. And I was editing in the pre-production, everything, because we go from the face of this, and then again here. So every single scene was rehearsed with meticulousness, like literally like that. So it was like to rehearse a theater play for months with that background of meticulousness and confidence that it gives you that, which is great. But no matter how prepared you are, as the best description of the filmmaking like this was, Kubrick said that it was like to try to write a poem when you are in a roller coaster. And it's exactly the same. You're trying to be very poetic, but then everything is collapsing around you. And no matter what, we were prepared for months. And then when we arrived, everything changed. The mood changed. The weather has impacted us. And then everything, what I thought was genius, is a piece of shit. And the camera move is now not working, and now doesn't make sense. And then you have to recreate things. The actors start getting their input and some kind of things, because they have learned from the characters things that now they are different persons, and we were 9 months there. So suddenly, like, I remember we did that, but you, now I had a beer like that, I will do that, and I said, great. So suddenly, all that precision, right, with the confidence of the precision, you are exposed to the adrenaline that we were running out of light, and we knew that we have 40 minutes to go out, freezing everybody else's, and everybody wants to go immediately out of there, and we have 1 or 2 takes. That's it. And when everybody knows that there's 1 or 2 takes, and that if we return to that will cost $500,000, everybody wants to go out. And so the panic of that puts you as an actor and as a director in an awareness and a state of mind that is like to be performing a theater play with the adrenaline, that live performance, but with the confidence of knowing where to go to. So that combination of chaos and confidence of rehearsal, I found it fascinating, and I think it got a good result, but we learn about it. I mean, it was something that I bring from Bergman, was similar, but this was in a massive, uncontrollable environment. And for example, one happy accident, I remember, happy accidents, for example, when the camera we always planned to go very close with these 14 millimeters to this super close-up, because we want to integrate the landscape to the close-ups. But when the breath was happening in the cold and suddenly was impacted the lens, that was an accident. And I love it. And so Chivo looked to me and suddenly the camera, and then I used that. It was an accident. And then, okay, cut in the editing room, you go to the cloud. So, or blood spilling in the lens. Great. Or things like that. Or Leo wants to eat the famous raw liver that he eat. And he said, great. And he did it, and he started vomiting, and it's in the film. So it's an accident that he provoked by being brave and being through it, and suddenly that vomit kind of cough. So, Aurora Boreal, we were shooting, and suddenly there was an Aurora Boreal in front of us, and and it's in the screen. So honestly, I think the accidents are the best part of this kind of process, but it's a combination of both things.
Well spoken indeed. Tom, happy accidents on your piece.
Jesus.
Now don't. Here's, I thought about this a lot. I mean, come on. I really thought about this a lot, because obviously the difference of the kinds of films that we have represented up here, I mean, come on, it's very clear. But the issue of casting, it's the same issue, whether you've got 50 people or 2 people. The issue of finding a location, it's the same issue. The issue, this too, about what kind of environment do you create, and the possibility, how does an accident actually play into the film? And I'm interested in that, because we try to control all of this. Yes, I love your fact that you said when 80% that we were saying, Adam, and there's a point at which it's not in our control. And can we take advantage of, in fact, what isn't in our control? And can it feed the pieces that we're trying to make.
Yes, I accept that.
Good, I'm glad.
Still Jesus. That's incredible. I mean, it's incredible. It's an incredible piece of filmmaking. Genuinely. But yeah, in different ways. We had our, we really didn't have many accidents, honestly. I was been thinking for 3 people, and I'm like, nope, really not an accident. Just because maybe the controlled environments of the world that we were playing with, and of course, within performance and the parameters of what accidents are, yes, there's little pieces you grab. One thing maybe that was interesting was, there's probably 2 little moments that come to mind. One was, we were supposed to start shooting earlier, in September, and because of financing such a mess nowadays, they kept pushing us and not green-lighting us, and so we couldn't get up and running. So our pre-production kept getting crunched, and what was more important is I had to have one scene in Fenway, and I really wanted this scene because I felt like knowing Boston, it says a lot about Boston, and not just because it's an iconic landmark, but I think it specifically speaks to the tribalism of that community, the kind of the clannishness that sometimes can be wonderful and inclusive, and sometimes it can get very toxic and insidious. And I think that was the sort of dark and light of the film in many ways. So I really wanted to be in Fenway, and it got to the point where we had 2 games that we could shoot. And now it had to be the first scene of the film. And just because we were shooting that scene in a live game, which wasn't a great idea maybe, but it was the only way to really get it. And I say that because we didn't have the money to control massive sections. When I got there, I said to one of my producers, like, now how do we own all this? He's like, no, just that little circle in there. Those 2 guys, we don't know them. They seem nice, and it was like a nightmare. And I got some famous actors in the scene, and it took us 9 innings and a little more to get a page and a half, which we should have, again, been able to do very quickly. But what happened was, then we finally had the last day. It was going to be the 2nd or 3rd day in the shoot, which was good because I wanted my crew to get a chance to get up and running and get familiar with everyone. But we had to move it back because the Yankee organization, and I am a lifelong Yankee fan, would not let us shoot that scene with them playing in the game because of the subject matter. They felt like it wasn't appropriate for the Yankee organization. I'm no longer a Yankee fan. So I'm open to any team that wants me. But we had to shoot it first, and it was a little overwhelming, and I think we literally just got the scene, I will say that. It was the first day for my actors, Ruffalo, Slattery, they were finding things, Brian Darcy James' character, and it was just a little rough, and we would have people kept walking into the scene and would see, Mark Ruffalo, and one guy literally offered him a beer mid-scene, and Mark said, no, it's okay, because Mark's too nice, said, no, it's okay, I'm just having O'Doul's. And the guys were like, O'Doul's, and then 3 innings later, when we were almost getting the scene, comes back through and goes, hey, Ruffalo, O'Doul's, And Masa Nobu, my cinematographer, who's just incredible, we were so far away, like peeking through, and he's just like, amazing, this is Boston. The accent, the happy part of it was, because it was a little bit of a fun, crazy nightmare night, was it gave everyone, and some of the other actors showed up for that scene, and the actual reporters were there. It really gave us a sense of Boston, of what we were doing. My wife showed up. She has not spent a lot of time in Boston, and she made her way through the crowd and got to me, and she's like, this is amazing, this city. I feel like I'm in the deep South. And I'm like, what do you mean? That's not ever how I think of Boston. She's like, it's just such a specific community, and it's so foreign to anything I know. And I thought, wow, that's a really important thing to remember when telling this story, that this community, 1, that it is, and 2, that we better get it right or it won't work. And so it turned out to be, in that way, not in the way of getting something on film, but in sense of inspiring the work we were doing, a really wonderful sort of baptism, if that's, I don't know if that's an inappropriate word for this particular movie, but like a baptism for the production,
There's a scene when Ruffalo goes and runs to get a cab. And the cab's on the street, and he sort of crosses the street. And I wondered about that moment. Obviously, you've planned it, but there was something about it that also felt immediate, spontaneous. The turn, the catch. What I'm talking about, maybe you knew he was going to go past him and he'd have to catch up. I have no idea what you actually were setting up, but
that was not an accident. That was just Mark being good. The only thing that was an accident about that is we had a stunt driver who wasn't good, and he got like 2 takes. And it's like one more take and he goes, and he did one more take and it stunk. And then so the captain had to do it, and the captain wasn't happy about it because he's the captain and he was sort of not. It should have been an easy maneuver, so he did it. So that meant he had to drive the cab through the rest of that scene, which we shot over like the next couple of weeks, and he was not happy about that either. And he was really mad at his stunt guy. But that was a pretty basic in Mark acting. Great actors make those things look good.
That's the point. They do make it feel real. They feel that moment is true and it's not rehearsed.
I think so. I think you rely on that. And, again, there's within this a million little happy accidents that happen and finding moments in production. But, we didn't have a big one like that.
Got it. Adam, clearly part of your work, if I understand as you were describing your style of directing, is in fact to create the possibility and atmosphere where something else is going to happen that you didn't plan on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think each story tells you how you need to approach it. I mean, there's certainly some other movies we've done that have action elements to it where we get more into what these guys were talking about with like previses and, you can't have accidents then because people get hurt. So in those cases, but we're always looking for sort of pockets where things go differently than you think they're going to go. I mean, what are there, like 32 different kinds of stories you can tell? So like, we're trying to always pretend that we're not telling that story so the audience doesn't know what's going to happen. In the case of The Big Short, it really called for it because these were guys who were outsiders. These were guys who were strange, who were flawed. In one case, one group found out about the deal literally through a wrong number. And these are guys who were bad in meetings, who had pit stains under their shirts, couldn't make eye contact. And so I wanted to go counter to the movies like, great movies like Margin Call and Wall Street, which were much more monolithic, and they showed marble buildings and everyone was very well dressed. And that was the power side of it. And these guys were on the periphery of it. So right away, my first choice, I wanted accidents in this movie. I wanted discoveries, was to hire Barry Ackroyd, who is just the master of letting the scene happen without influencing it. And he shoots on long lenses, so the actors never know when they're getting their close-up or their medium or whatever. And he's always searching and playing, so constantly every scene there's discoveries where I'm running over and punching Barry in the arm and going, oh, God, keep doing that, And so the process of just shooting any scene becomes kind of a discovery / accident. And then what I would do is I would set traps in scenes. I would actually purposely set it up so that something would go wrong. And I would have people enter at the wrong points. And if I was doing off camera, I would always change the dialogue on the actor to throw them. And we wanted everything. We wanted people to talk over each other. It had to have this raggedy quality because these real guys were feeling so much anxiety and they were on such a roller coaster and they were excited. They were terrified. Some of them got physically ill. 2 of them experienced panic attacks for the first time in their lives. That's how horrible and stressful this was. So we wanted the whole movie to kind of be tripping over itself like that. So it had to be built into it. There's a lot of examples of it. There are tons and tons of accidents, but the main thing I would do is I would just, there was a scene where Carell comes into his office front point for the first time and just kind of busts in the door and starts talking about how his wife is giving him shit. And I just kept delaying his cue. And I kept telling the guys, you got to talk till he comes in. And sometimes I would do it for 10 seconds. Sometimes I'd let them go for a minute and a half. One time, I think Hamish Linklater even stopped and he was like, what's going on? And I'm like, keep going, keep going. And sure enough, out of that came this great moment where Rafe Spall talks about having a swollen epididymis. And it ended up being this illustrated beat. And it showed how they all busted each other's balls. It gave each other a hard time. And it was completely improvised and discovered. The whole method of this film was that I never called cut when I was supposed to call cut. I always went way longer. always was having people enter, telling someone, go in there, tell them this, and trying to keep them off balance. And fortunately, we just had an amazing cast. I mean, actors who could all handle this, so it was okay.
Was your camera person operating as well?
The great thing with you mean Barry Ackroyd
Yes.
operates a camera, which is great. So he's actually, and God, is he amazing. And so, yeah, with him as the foundation, and I told him, we just had a progression, like start off, give me some basic coverage so I know I've got it. And then I would tell Barry, I was like, go to town, my friend, go to Impressionisticville. And he would start to just find different things. But the actors started to figure out they had no standard coverage, and it just created these great dynamics and performances that were going on. I'm trying to think of the craziest accident we had. One thing I wanted to do on this film, and I hadn't really done it this much before, and I'm sure some of you guys have done it, but I tried to use as much real background as possible. I just said, give me like 6 background people that we control. Let real New York walk by. Let real New Orleans. And I told them, I said, I don't mind if background tags the camera, if they look at the camera, like let it happen. And I'd never done that before.
Did that happen in the Vegas? There's a Vegas moment when the 2 old people are walking away and there's a rack focus to that was, you didn't plan this?
Oh no, those are real people. And and I told my ADs, let them tag the camera. There's a moment in a John Sayles film that I always have loved called Brother from Another Planet.
Yep.
Where they're up in Harlem, and I think it's back before the legal stuff got so tricky where you had to get like a waiver from everyone. And there's just a great moment where clearly they're shooting out of a car and they go by a corner in Harlem, and there's some dude with sunglasses just gives a long look to the camera. And it just drew me into the film in such a way. Now, once again, the story has to be right for this.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
In staging something like there's a scene when it's sort of near the end of the piece, and it's a scene when Baum is arguing with someone from one of the I don't know, Stearns is saying the 200% or whatever it is, and everything's going that way, and you've got a large audience and everybody's getting up and leaving because they're all looking at their phones. Do you remember how that got staged for you?
Yeah, that was my AD, Matt Rebikoff, obviously orchestrated it, but I stood behind him and I changed it every time. So they had their progression. This group goes, then this group's, and I would be behind Matt. I'd go, no, call the second group now. Call the third group right on top of the second. And I tried to get this log jam going. I wanted it to be broken. And so we kept messing with it every single take. And Matt's like, are you going to change it every time? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to change it every time. And so that is how you get like this kind of confusion from the extras, because that moment, it's a real moment where when Bears started collapsing, the whole street, all of Wall Street, went, what the hell? So I wanted that kind of cattle log jam in there. So yeah, we screwed with that every single take.
Very cool, very cool.
We hope you enjoyed listening to part 2 of this exclusive discussion. You can watch the full video of the Feature Film Symposium and many other director Q&As on our website at dga.org/events. Be sure to download next week's episode as our 5 feature film nominees finish their discussion covering topics like staging and working with actors, as well as discoveries made and challenges faced during the editorial process. If you're enjoying the Director's Cut, please subscribe to it on iTunes or our SoundCloud page so you won't miss an episode. And leave us a review. We'd love to hear your feedback. We hope you hear from us soon. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.